At a party, my wife said she would rather kiss a stranger than kiss me. People laughed like it was a joke, like I was the punchline. They thought I was embarrassed and beaten down. They were wrong. When I finally opened my mouth, the laughter stopped fast. What came after that was not yelling or crying. It was much worse than that. This is how a quiet man hits back. My name is Michael Turner, but most folks call me Mike. I am 52 years old. For the last 30 years, I have run a regional food distribution business with my son, Ethan. We supply restaurants, hotels, and catering companies across 4 states. It is steady, honest work. It paid the bills and gave us what I thought was a good life. The night everything broke apart was September 14th at Robert and Linda Collins' yearly garden party. They had been throwing these parties for as long as I could remember. Always early fall, when the Georgia air was just right. Warm enough for drinks outside, cool enough for the women to wear expensive scarves and talk about where they bought them. My wife, Jessica, loved those parties. She loved the gossip, the wine, and the chance to show off whatever new outfit she had bought that week. I did not enjoy them, but after 27 years of marriage, you show up. You smile. You talk about interest rates in college football. Then you go home. That is how it usually went. But not this time. For 4 months before that night, I had been documenting Jessica's affair. Not guessing. Not assuming. Documenting. I had dates, times, hotel receipts, text messages she thought were gone, and voice messages she left on a prepaid phone I found hidden in her gym bag. The man was Robert Collins. Yes, the same Robert whose yard we were standing in, drinking his expensive bourbon and eating his wife's homemade crab cakes. I spent weeks thinking about how to handle it. A quiet divorce. A private confrontation at home. But something in me wanted the truth to come out the same way the lie lived. Out in the open. In front of friends. In a place where they both felt safe. Music played softly. Some smooth jazz nobody would remember. Small groups stood around the stone patio laughing louder than the jokes deserved. Jessica had been drinking since we arrived. Her cheeks were red, her voice sharper with every glass. I watched her by the fire pit with Linda and a couple of other women, and I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just a cold, steady calm. Around 8:30 in the evening, someone suggested dancing. A few couples shuffled toward the center of the patio. I walked over to Jessica and held out my hand. "Dance with me," I said. She stared at me like I had lost my mind. "Since when do you dance, Mike?" "Since tonight," I said. "One dance." She sighed, set her wine down, and took my hand like she was agreeing to a dentist appointment. We stepped onto the patio. I put my hand on her waist. She was stiff and distant, already looking past me toward the bar. The song slowed. I leaned in to kiss her cheek. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see her reaction. I needed one last confirmation. She jerked away and laughed, sharp and bitter. "Loud enough for people nearby to hear," she said. "I would rather kiss a stranger than kiss you." Conversation stopped. A few people laughed nervously. Jessica smirked, enjoying the attention and the sting she had just delivered. I did not react. I looked past her to Robert, standing by the grill with a beer in his hand, frozen in place. Then I looked back at my wife and smiled. Small and calm. "That is funny," I said. "Because Robert is not a stranger, is he?" The silence was total. Jessica's face drained of color. Robert stepped back like space might save him. Linda looked between us, confusion turning into horror. I turned to the group and spoke evenly. For months. Mostly Tuesdays and Thursdays. The Marriott off exit 37. Room 214. Paid for with our joint credit card. Jessica tried to speak. Nothing came out. Robert looked like he might pass out. I set my drink down, nodded politely, and walked toward the gate. Behind me, everything exploded. Voices rose. Someone gasped. Jessica called my name, half panic, half rage. I did not turn around. I got into my truck, turned the key, and drove off. I left my wife standing in a garden full of people who finally saw her for who she really was. That night was the last time most of them ever knew me as the man I used to be. I did not go home. I went to an apartment I had rented 3 months earlier through a business limited liability company. It was a clean one-bedroom place in Alpharetta, about 40 minutes from our house in Roswell. Fully furnished. No personal touches. Anonymous. Completely off Jessica's radar. I had been getting ready for that night far longer than she ever imagined. The next morning, Jessica woke up to an empty house. I left my wedding ring on the nightstand, placed carefully on top of printed bank statements. Every hotel charge. Every suspicious transaction. Every lie laid out in black and white. No note. No explanation. Just proof. At midnight, my phone had been removed from our family plan. I disabled location sharing, closed our joint checking account, and transferred my share into a new account at a different bank. The mortgage and utilities stayed on automatic payment through an escrow account I had set up weeks earlier. Everything practical stayed running. Everything personal was gone. By 8 o'clock that morning, Jessica started calling my office. My assistant, Karen, had already been told what to say. "Mr. Turner is no longer with the company," she said politely. "I am not authorized to share his location." That part was not exactly true. I had not left the business. I had reorganized it. 2 weeks earlier, I moved my ownership into a trust with my son Ethan listed as manager and primary beneficiary. On paper, I had retired. In real life, I simply removed Jessica's access to everything I built. Ethan was the first one who noticed something was wrong. 6 months earlier, he saw Jessica having lunch with Robert Collins at a restaurant 2 towns over. They were not eating. They were holding hands and laughing like teenagers. Ethan took a photo and showed it to me that afternoon. That was the moment I started planning my exit. Our daughter Lauren was different. She lived in Charlotte, worked in marketing, and spoke to her mother twice a week. She admired Jessica and believed she was strong and independent. I knew Lauren would side with her mother at first, so I prepared a full packet of documents for her. I did not send it yet. Soon, but not yet. By noon that first day, Jessica had called me 17 times. I know because I forwarded my old number to a voicemail service that transcribed her messages and emailed them to me. I read every one. They went from confused to angry to desperate in just a few hours. "Where are you? People are asking questions. This is childish. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed Robert and Linda. What is wrong with you?" Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the tone changed. "Please come home. We can fix this." I deleted every message without replying. Words were her weapon. Silence worked better for me. That evening, I met my attorney, Daniel Brooks, at his downtown office. He had been preparing the divorce paperwork for weeks. Everything was ready. We filed that night, citing irreconcilable differences and attaching proof of Jessica's affair to enforce the terms of our prenuptial agreement. She would not receive the papers for 3 days. By then, she would already be living in a world where I no longer existed in any way she recognized. 3 days after the party, Jessica finally understood how deep this went. The documents arrived by courier at 10 o'clock in the morning, delivered straight to our front door in a priority envelope she had marked for personal delivery. I knew the exact moment she opened it. My phone alerted me through the doorbell camera I had installed months earlier. Inside was more than a divorce petition. It was a full financial breakdown of our marriage, especially her relationship with Robert. Every hotel charge matched against Robert's travel schedule. Every suspicious transfer traced. Money she believed was invested in a real estate project Robert pitched to her the previous spring. $87,000, moved slowly over 6 months in small amounts she thought I would miss. The project never existed. The company was registered to a post office box in Delaware. Robert was the only officer. The money went straight into an offshore account he planned to use when he eventually left his own wife. What Jessica did not know was that I had been tracking everything. In May, I hired a forensic accountant named Sandra, a quiet professional who specialized in finding hidden money. She followed every dollar through shell companies and across state lines, documenting it all with calm precision. By the time Jessica finished reading those papers, there was nothing left to argue about. The truth had already done the work for me. The divorce filing included Sandra's full report. 83 pages of clean, organized financial proof. It showed that Jessica had not only cheated, but had helped move money out of our marital assets. Plain and simple, it was theft. Under our prenuptial agreement, infidelity combined with financial misconduct triggered a total forfeiture clause. Jessica was not entitled to anything beyond the bare legal minimum, and even that would be challenged. By noon, she showed up at Daniel Brooks' office demanding to see me. Daniel's secretary called from the lobby. "Mrs. Turner is here," she said calmly. "She is very upset and insists on speaking with you." "Tell her I am not available," I replied. "And remind her that once she hires an attorney, all communication goes through legal counsel." That same afternoon, Jessica hired Richard Lawson, a loud and aggressive divorce lawyer known for protecting wealthy wives. He was expensive and confident. What he did not know was that I had already closed every door he planned to push on. Later that day, my phone rang again. This time it was Linda Collins. Her voice shook. "Mike, I need to know the truth. How long has this been going on?" I told her exactly what I knew. 11 months, based on the earliest hotel receipt. She went silent for a long time. Then she said quietly, "I am filing tomorrow. I wanted you to know. Robert will not escape this either." 2 marriages were ending at the same time. A few days after the paperwork was filed, I sent a package to my daughter Lauren. Overnight delivery to her apartment in Charlotte. Signature required. Inside was a tablet, fully charged. One folder sat on the screen. The name was simple. The Truth. It contained everything. Photos of Jessica and Robert entering hotels. Credit card statements with charges highlighted. Text messages pulled from a cloud backup Jessica forgot existed. And voice messages she left on Robert's phone, obtained legally through subpoenas during the financial investigation. One message stood out. It was from March, 3 weeks before Lauren's birthday. Jessica sounded excited and careless. "I cannot wait until this is over. Once Mike signs the investment papers, we will have enough to disappear for a while. Maybe 6 months in Europe. I am so tired of pretending to be a devoted wife." I did not call Lauren. I did not text her. I waited. 2 days later, my phone rang. Her name appeared. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Dad," she said, her voice tight. "I need to see you." We met the next morning at a coffee shop near her office. She looked exhausted. Red eyes. Hair pulled back without care. Not the confident daughter I knew. She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. "I wrote this last night," she said. "I want you to read it before I send it." It was an email addressed to her mother. Calm. Precise. Devastating. Lauren listed every lie, every manipulation, every excuse Jessica used to paint me as the absent husband. The final line was one sentence. "I do not recognize the woman who raised me, and I do not want to." I pushed the laptop back gently. "Do not send it yet," I said. "Let her show you who she really is first. You need to see it without filters." Lauren nodded and closed the computer. "Ethan said you planned this for months," she said. "He said you were protecting us." I replied. "Including your mother," from herself. Lauren reached across the table and took my hand. "I am sorry I did not see it sooner." "You were not supposed to," I said. That was the point. Jessica's world began collapsing in ways she never expected. The party did more than expose her affair. It destroyed her reputation. Within a week, invitations stopped coming. Her book club suddenly had scheduling problems. The hospital charity she chaired asked her to step down due to personal matters. Even her yoga instructor stopped replying to messages. In a community like ours, reputation was everything. And Jessica had none left. I watched most of it unfold through Ethan. He still had ties to that social world through his girlfriend, Sarah. Sarah's mother moved in the same circles as Jessica, and news traveled fast there. Faster than truth ever needs to. According to what Ethan heard, Linda Collins filed for divorce 3 days after the party. She did not protect anyone. She told mutual friends exactly what happened. The affair, the money, the lies. Within 48 hours, it was common knowledge. Robert Collins vanished almost immediately. Ethan heard he moved out the same night as the party and checked into an extended stay hotel near the airport. His consulting firm, which depended on reputation and local trust, started bleeding clients. 2 major accounts canceled contracts within a week, citing concerns about judgment and ethics. Linda did not waste time. She hired one of the toughest divorce attorneys in Atlanta. Joint accounts were frozen. Legal restrictions were filed to keep Robert away from certain assets. Then she delivered the final blow. She sent a detailed letter to the board of directors at their country club, where Robert had been a member for 15 years. His membership was suspended pending review. In that world, that was social exile. But the hardest hit for Jessica came from somewhere she never expected. Her job. She had worked for 8 years as a regional human resources director at a healthcare management company. Good salary. Strong title. It gave her the professional identity she always wanted. Human resources departments do not tolerate public scandals, especially when money is involved. Someone sent her employer an anonymous message. I never found out who. The email included bank statements and limited liability company records showing Robert's offshore accounts. It did not accuse Jessica directly, but it raised enough red flags for the legal department to step in. 2 weeks after the party, Jessica was placed on administrative leave. Officially, It was an internal review for potential conflicts of interest. In reality, the company wanted distance while a divorce involving financial misconduct played out in public records. That was when she called me. It was a Tuesday night, around 10:30. She got my new number from Lauren. I answered and stayed quiet. "Mike," she said, strained and angry. "I lost my job. They put me on leave. You know what that means. This is your fault." I documented the truth. I replied calmly. "What you did with Robert and the money were your choices. I did not create them." "You humiliated me," she snapped. "You turned our children against me and destroyed my career." "You destroyed your career," I said evenly, "the moment you decided to steal from our marriage to fund an escape plan." There was a long silence. Then she said coldly, "This is not over. My lawyer says we can fight the prenuptial agreement." "Good luck," I said, and ended the call. I did not block her number. I wanted her to know she could reach me. I just had nothing to say. 3 months after the garden party, I did something she never expected. I organized a charity event. It was for the dedication of a new pediatric wing at Northside Hospital, funded in part by a donation I made in my parents' names. $250,000, given through the family trust Ethan and I created when I restructured the business. It was not about being generous. It was about making a statement. The guest list included everyone from that garden party, plus the wider social circle Jessica spent years building. Doctors, business owners, community leaders, the people whose opinions once defined her world. The event was black tie, held at the Four Seasons. There was a live auction and speeches from hospital staff and families whose children were receiving care. Ethan and Lauren stood beside me as we greeted guests. Lauren flew in from Charlotte just for the night. She wore a simple navy dress and carried herself with quiet confidence. She reminded me of her mother at that age, but with something Jessica never had: depth. Lauren spent the past 3 months volunteering at a children's clinic. She told me watching everything fall apart pushed her to do something meaningful. Sarah was there too, standing close to Ethan. And everywhere I looked, I saw the same thing. People knew exactly who I was now, and exactly who Jessica was not. Sarah was a sweet girl. She worked as a schoolteacher. Steady, honest, kind. Exactly the kind of person Ethan needed in his life. The 4 of us stood together near the entrance of the ballroom, a solid front, and I watched people come up to us with smiles and compliments. One woman I vaguely recognized from the country club leaned in and said, "Your family must be so proud." "We are," Lauren replied easily, resting her hand on my arm. "My dad has always believed in giving back to the community. That is one of the things I respect most about him." No one missed the contrast. There I was, the husband who had been left behind, standing with my children, supporting pediatric healthcare. And Jessica was nowhere to be seen. Her name was not in the program. Her absence said everything. Her exile was complete. During the speeches, the hospital chief executive officer, Dr. Margaret Hollis, thanked donors by name. When she mentioned the Turner Family Trust, the room applauded. I stood briefly, nodded, and sat back down. The applause felt real. Earned. It felt like closure. Later, during the reception, Linda Collins approached me. She looked thinner than I remembered, sharper somehow, but stronger. "Mike," she said, shaking my hand. "Thank you for inviting me. This is a beautiful evening." "I am glad you came," I told her. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "My divorce was finalized last week. Robert walked away with almost nothing. The prenuptial agreement held." "I am glad," I said and meant it. "You handled everything the right way," she added. "No drama. No public fighting. I learned from watching you." I nodded. Sometimes silence does more than anger. Linda glanced around the room. "This is how you win. You build something better." She was right. Jessica expected me to beg, to fall apart, to fight her in public. Instead, I stepped back, rebuilt my life, and stood stronger than before, surrounded by people who mattered. 6 months after the garden party, Jessica finally forced a face-to-face meeting. She showed up unannounced at Ethan's office on a Tuesday afternoon. Ethan called me right away. "Dad, Mom is here. She refuses to leave unless she sees you." I was finishing lunch nearby. "I will be there in 15 minutes. Keep her in the conference room. Do not let her near anything." When I arrived, Ethan stood outside the room, uneasy. Through the glass wall, I saw Jessica sitting stiffly at the table. She looked thinner, harder, like something inside her had worn away. I walked in, closed the door, and stayed standing with my arms crossed. She looked up. For a split second, I saw something like regret. Then it vanished. "We need to talk," she said. "We communicate through attorneys," I replied calmly. "I do not care," she snapped. "You ruined everything. My job, my friends, my relationship with our children. I documented your affair and the money you took," I said evenly. "Everything else came from your choices." "Robert manipulated me," she insisted. "He said the investment was real." "You knew you were hiding money," I said. "You knew you were meeting him in hotels every week." She stood up sharply. "You humiliated me publicly. You could have handled this privately." "You humiliated yourself," I said. "I only told the truth." She hesitated, then said quietly, "I loved him." "Robert loved your money," I replied. "He was building an offshore account. You were funding it. He was never planning a life with you." She stared at me, and I saw it. The moment the last lie collapsed. For the first time, there was nothing left for her to argue with. Her face drained of color. She lowered herself back into the chair like her legs could not support her anymore. "That is not true," she whispered. "It is," I said quietly. "And deep down, you already knew it." The silence between us was thick and uncomfortable. Then Jessica looked up at me with something I had not seen in years. Vulnerability. "What happens now?" she asked. "The divorce continues," I said. "You receive what the prenuptial agreement allows, which is not much given what you did. You move on and build whatever life you can. And we stop pretending there is anything left between us." "The children hate me," she said softly. "They are disappointed in you," I corrected. "That is not the same thing. Whether they forgive you someday is their choice, not mine. I will not stand in the way if they decide to have a relationship with you." She nodded and stood up. She looked smaller than before, worn down. "I am sorry, Mike," she said, "for what it is worth." "It is worth nothing," I replied, not cruel, just honest. "But I appreciate you saying it." She paused at the door. "You were always the better person." "No," I said. "I was just the one who kept his promises." She left without another word. I watched her walk down the hallway and disappear. Ethan stepped up beside me. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." 2 years after the divorce was final, Lauren got married. She found a good man named Daniel, a systems engineer in Charlotte. Steady, kind. The wedding was small, held in November at a mountain vineyard. Close family and friends only. Jessica was not invited. That was Lauren's decision. She had tried for months to repair things, but trust never came back. "I do not hate her," Lauren told me once. "I just do not trust her, and I do not want her there on the most important day of my life." I supported her completely. On the morning of the wedding, I helped Lauren fasten her necklace. She wore a simple ivory dress and looked radiant. "You look beautiful," I said. "Thank you, Dad," she replied, tears in her eyes. "I am glad you are here." "There is nowhere else I would be." "You could have fallen apart," she said. "But you did not. You showed me what real strength looks like." I hugged her carefully. "You were always strong. You just needed to see it." The ceremony was perfect. Ethan stood beside me, Sarah holding his hand, 6 months pregnant. Nearby sat Daniel Brooks and Sandra, both now friends. During the reception, Lauren pulled me onto the dance floor. As we swayed, she rested her head on my shoulder. "Do you ever think about her?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "I do not miss her. I just wonder if she ever learned who she really was." "She asked to send a gift," Lauren said. "What did you say?" "No, thank you." That was honest, I told her. And boundaries matter. Later, as the night settled, I stood on the terrace with Ethan. "Good day," he said. "The best," I replied. He smiled. "If the baby is a boy, we want to name him after Grandpa." I nodded, my throat tight. He would have loved that. We watched the sun set over the mountains. The chaos of that old garden party felt like another lifetime. What remained was peace, family, and a life rebuilt the right way. Because it really was over. The final divorce hearing happened on a gray March morning, almost 3 years after that garden party. The courtroom was small and plain. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, giving everything a cold, washed-out look. Nothing dramatic. Just the end of something already dead. I arrived early with Daniel Brooks, wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather folder I did not actually need. Every document that mattered had been filed weeks earlier. Jessica arrived about 10 minutes before the hearing started. She came alone. Her attorney, Richard Lawson, had dropped her case 6 months earlier officially citing irreconcilable differences. That usually meant the client refused to listen. She went through 2 more lawyers after that before deciding to represent herself. Daniel warned me it was a bad idea. She looked different. Older, yes, but it was more than that. Her face was tight, drawn. She had lost too much weight, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame. There was a hardness in her eyes that had not been there before. We did not speak. We did not look at each other. We sat on opposite sides of the room and waited. At 9 o'clock sharp, Judge Eleanor Whitman entered. She was in her 60s, gray-haired, and known for being direct. She skimmed the file, then looked at us over her glasses. "This is the final hearing for the dissolution of marriage between Michael Turner and Jessica Turner," she said. "I have reviewed the prenuptial agreement, financial disclosures, and evidence of marital misconduct. Do either of you have a final statement before I rule?" Jessica stood. "Your Honor, I am requesting another continuance." "Denied," the judge said immediately. "You have had 3 years and multiple attorneys. We are proceeding today." Jessica sat down, her jaw tight. The judge spent the next 20 minutes explaining her decision. The prenuptial agreement was valid and enforceable. The affair and financial misconduct were material violations. Asset division would follow the agreement exactly. Jessica would receive $75,000, her personal vehicle, and any property she brought into the marriage. Everything else, the house, the business interests, investment accounts, and lake property, remained with me or the family trust one created with the children. She was also responsible for half of the $87,000 she transferred into the fake investment, which the court ruled was personal debt. When the judge finished, she looked at us both. "The marriage is dissolved. I strongly recommend no further contact unless legally necessary." She struck the gavel once. It was done. Jessica stood and walked out without looking back. I watched her leave and felt nothing. No relief. No triumph. Just completion. Outside, Daniel shook my hand. "It is finished. You can finally move on." "I already did," I said. "This was just paperwork catching up." I drove straight to Ethan's house. He and Sarah asked me to come no matter how the hearing went. Lauren was there too. She flew in from Charlotte that morning. Ethan was grilling in the backyard. Sarah held their 6-month-old son, Patrick, named after my father. "How did it go?" Lauren asked. "It is finished," I said. She hugged me tightly. "Good. You deserve peace." We spent the afternoon together, eating, talking about normal things. Ethan and Sarah were looking at houses in a better school district. Lauren and her husband were thinking about moving back to Georgia. The business was growing, and I was slowly stepping back, focusing more on family and less on work. As the sun dipped low, I sat on the porch holding Patrick. Ethan sat beside me. "Do you ever regret how you handled it?" he asked quietly. "Walking away. Doing it publicly." I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "No. I protected what mattered. I protected you and your sister and the life we built. Your mother made her choices. I made mine." Ethan nodded. "Good. Because I am proud of you." And for the first time in a long while, I knew I had done everything right. "You showed me what it means to have a backbone." Hearing that from my son mattered more than he probably knew. I looked at Ethan, this good man who stood beside me through everything, and I felt grateful. Not for what broke our family apart, but for what we built afterward. If you told me 5 years earlier that I would be standing on a dock in Maine, watching the sun rise over the Atlantic with a woman I met at a hospital fundraiser, I would have laughed. But that is exactly where I found myself one late summer morning. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly content. Her name is Claire. Dr. Claire Hutchinson. She is a pediatric oncologist. We met 2 years after my divorce was final, at the same hospital gala where I had made a donation. She spoke that night, and afterward we ended up in the same conversation group. She was smart, direct, and had a laugh that made people feel at ease. She had been widowed 5 years earlier when her husband died suddenly at 49. She had a teenage son, Matthew, quiet and thoughtful, obsessed with astronomy and bad science fiction movies. Claire and I moved slowly. Dinners. Long phone calls. No games. No pretending. When I told her about my marriage and the divorce, she listened and said one simple thing. "People show you who they are. You just have to be willing to see it." We had been together almost a year, and it felt right in a way my marriage never did. Not dramatic. Not complicated. Just honest and calm. The trip to Maine was her idea. She owned a small cottage on the water that her parents left her. Matthew was away at science camp, so we had the place to ourselves. We spent our days hiking, reading, cooking, and talking about everything and nothing. That morning on the dock, Claire leaned into me. "I am glad you are here," she said. "Me too," I answered, and meant it. She smiled. "Lauren called yesterday. She asked if I would go dress shopping with her next month." Lauren and her husband were expecting their first child, a little girl named Sophie, who would be baptized in October. Lauren asked Claire to be the godmother. It was her way of welcoming her into the family. "What did you say?" I asked. "Yes," Claire said. "Obviously. Lauren learned that kindness from you," I said. She laughed and shook her head. "You are smooth." Later that week, Ethan called. He and Sarah were expecting again. Twins this time. "Dad, I am not sure I am ready for 3 kids under 3, he said, half laughing, half terrified. "No one is ever ready," I told him. "You figure it out as you go." The week ended too fast. But when Claire and I drove back to Georgia, we were not sad. We were making plans. More trips. Holidays together. Maybe living under one roof once Matthew finished high school. Life had become something I looked forward to again. I had grandchildren I adored. Children who respected me. Work that challenged me without consuming me. And a partner who saw me clearly and chose me anyway. Jessica existed somewhere out there, living the life she managed to build. I did not think about her much anymore. When I did, it was without anger. Just distance. On my 57th birthday, 5 years after that garden party, I woke up in my own home. Claire was beside me. Downstairs, I heard laughter and chaos. Lauren and her husband getting Sophie ready. Ethan chasing Patrick while Sarah handled the twins. It was loud, messy, perfect. That afternoon, surrounded by family, I blew out the candles on a cake Lauren made. Someone asked what I wished for. "Nothing," I said. "I already have everything I need." The life I built after my marriage was not perfect, but it was honest. It was filled with people who valued integrity, loyalty, and respect. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is building a life so solid that the past no longer matters. And that is exactly what I did.